Imagine discovering a hidden chamber beneath an ancient castle. Inside lies a stone coffin. There is no royal crown, no priceless treasure, and no name carved into the cold stone. The only thing visible is a series of deep scratches across the inside of the lid, as if someone trapped within had desperately fought for freedom until their final breath. Now imagine learning that this forgotten coffin may have belonged to a queen whose existence was erased from history itself. Some believed she died from a mysterious illness, while others claimed she simply vanished without a trace. But an ancient legend, whispered through generations, tells a far more terrifying story. It says she was not executed, nor did she die naturally. According to the legend, she was buried alive by the very man who had once sworn to love and protect her forever. Tonight, we uncover one of the darkest royal mysteries ever told. A tale of betrayal, hidden passages beneath an ancient castle, dangerous secrets, and a truth that remained buried beneath stone for centuries. Before we begin, remember that this story is inspired by historical themes and medieval legends. It is a fictional tale created purely for entertainment and storytelling. Centuries ago, in the heart of medieval Europe, there stood a magnificent stone castle whose towering walls had survived countless wars and whose towering spires seemed to touch the clouds. To the people of the kingdom, it was a symbol of strength, glory, and royal power. Yet behind those mighty walls, silence ruled like an unseen prisoner. The castle concealed secrets so dark that even the bravest soldiers refused to speak of them after sunset. At its center ruled King Aldric, a man admired by his army, feared by his enemies, and obeyed without question by every noble in the kingdom. His wisdom and military victories had earned him a legendary reputation, and many believed he was the greatest ruler of his generation. However, those closest to him knew another side of the king. Every decision he made was carefully calculated, every smile concealed another secret, and every act of kindness seemed to serve a hidden purpose. No one dared question his authority because those who challenged the king rarely remained alive long enough to regret it. There was, however, one person who never feared speaking honestly before him, his young wife, Queen Eleanor. Unlike many royal brides who had been raised among politics and ambition, Eleanor was known for her kindness, compassion, and gentle heart. She often visited nearby villages without a grand procession, listened patiently to ordinary people, comforted the sick, and remembered the names of children she had met only once. Before long, the people adored their queen far more than they admired their king. They saw hope in her smile and kindness in her words, and whenever she appeared among them, the streets filled with cheers. At first, King Aldric appeared proud of her popularity. During public ceremonies he smiled warmly beside her, held her hand before cheering crowds, and commissioned magnificent paintings that portrayed them as the happiest royal couple in Europe. To the outside world, their marriage seemed perfect, almost like a fairy tale brought to life. But behind the castle walls, everything was slowly changing. The king began holding secret meetings after midnight, trusted advisors disappeared without explanation, and entire sections of the ancient castle were suddenly declared forbidden. Even members of the royal family were warned never to approach the oldest underground corridors beneath the fortress. Whenever Queen Eleanor asked her husband about these strange changes, he gave the same calm reply: "There are places better left forgotten." Yet each time he spoke those words, Eleanor noticed something far more disturbing than anger or annoyance. She saw fear in his eyes. It was a fear that no powerful king should ever possess. After all, kings do not fear empty tunnels, unless someone, or something, is hidden beneath them. One cold and stormy evening, unable to sleep, Queen Eleanor wandered alone through the silent corridors of the castle carrying nothing but a small candle. The wind howled through narrow windows, making every hallway echo with whispers that seemed almost alive. As she reached the oldest wing of the castle, she stopped abruptly. A heavily armed guard stood before a thick wooden door that had never before been protected. The soldier immediately lowered his eyes and bowed. "My queen," he said nervously, "you cannot enter." Eleanor frowned in confusion. Since when does the queen need permission to walk inside her own castle? The guard hesitated, his hands trembling as he answered, "I have direct orders from the king." Eleanor looked beyond him, studying the ancient door. It wasn't the door that caught her attention. It was the fresh mud covering the stone floor beneath it. Someone had recently emerged from underground. Without another word, she calmly turned away and disappeared into the darkness. But from that moment forward, Queen Eleanor knew the castle was hiding something far more terrifying than politics. Beneath those ancient stones rested a secret waiting to change her life forever. That night, Queen Eleanor could not sleep. No matter how hard she tried to convince herself that the king's strange behavior had a simple explanation, the image of the muddy footprints outside the forbidden door refused to leave her mind. Someone had been beneath the castle, and whatever was hidden there was important enough for the king to guard it with his most trusted soldiers. For the next several days, Eleanor quietly watched everything around her. She noticed servants whispering to one another before suddenly falling silent whenever she approached. Guards who had once greeted her warmly now avoided looking into her eyes. Even the atmosphere inside the castle had changed. It no longer felt like a royal home. Instead, it felt like a place where everyone was living in fear. One afternoon, while walking through the royal gardens, an elderly maid named Margaret cautiously approached the Queen. Margaret had served the royal family for more than 40 years and was one of the few people Eleanor completely trusted. Looking around to make sure no one was listening, the old woman spoke in a trembling voice. "Your Majesty, there are stories about this castle that no one dares repeat anymore." Eleanor looked at her with curiosity. "What stories?" Margaret hesitated before answering. "They say the castle was not built only to protect the kingdom from enemies outside its walls. It was also built to imprison dangerous secrets beneath the ground." The Queen remained silent. The oldest servants believed there were hidden tunnels stretching for miles beneath the castle. Some say they led to forgotten chambers where people simply disappeared. A cold breeze passed through the garden. Before Eleanor could ask another question, Margaret stepped back in fear. "I have already said too much." Without another word, the old maid hurried away, leaving the Queen standing alone with more questions than answers. That evening, Eleanor made a decision. She would discover the truth herself. Long after midnight, when the castle had fallen silent and even the guards seemed exhausted, the Queen wrapped herself in a dark cloak and quietly left her chamber. Carrying only a small lantern, she walked toward the forbidden wing she had seen days earlier. This time, the guard was gone. The heavy wooden door stood slightly open. For a brief moment, Eleanor considered turning back. Every instinct warned her that crossing that doorway would change her life forever. But curiosity proved stronger than fear. She pushed the door open. A narrow stone staircase disappeared into complete darkness beneath the castle. The air felt cold and damp. Each step echoed through the tunnel as though someone, or something, was listening. The deeper she descended, the older the walls became. Strange symbols had been carved into the stone centuries earlier. Some had faded with time, while others remained surprisingly clear, as if someone had cleaned them only days before. Then she heard it. A faint metallic sound. Clang, clang, clang. It echoed somewhere far below. Eleanor froze. It sounded almost like chains being dragged across the floor. She held her breath and listened carefully. Silence. Perhaps it had only been the wind. Gathering her courage, she continued forward until the staircase opened into a vast underground chamber unlike anything she had ever imagined. The room was enormous. Ancient pillars supported the ceiling, while rows of abandoned torches lined the walls. Dust covered almost everything, suggesting that no one had entered for decades. Almost everything. Near the center of the chamber, Eleanor noticed something strange. Fresh footprints. Someone had been there recently. She followed them carefully until they stopped before a massive stone wall. At first glance, it appeared completely ordinary. But when Eleanor held her lantern closer, she noticed tiny gaps between the stones. It wasn't a wall. It was a hidden door. As she gently pressed against it, the ancient mechanism groaned. Slowly, the stone door began to open. A rush of freezing air escaped from the darkness beyond. Inside was a narrow chamber containing only a single wooden table. Resting upon it was an old leather-bound journal. Its pages had turned yellow with age. The cover bore no title, only the royal crest. With trembling hands, Eleanor opened the journal. The first several pages listed names. Dozens of names. Each followed by a single date. No explanations. No titles. Just names. As she turned another page, the handwriting suddenly changed. The words read, **, some truths must never reach the people. A kingdom can survive war, famine, and plague, but it cannot survive the truth buried beneath this castle. **. Eleanor's heart began to race. She turned another page. Then another. Each entry became darker than the last. The journal spoke of secret trials held beneath the castle, of prisoners whose existence had been erased, of nobles who vanished overnight after discovering forbidden knowledge. Every page revealed another horrifying secret hidden by generations of kings. Then Eleanor reached the final written page. There, in fresh black ink, was a single sentence. **, the Queen is beginning to ask questions. **. She stared at the words in disbelief. The ink had not faded. It looked as though it had been written only hours earlier. Someone knew she was searching. Someone had expected her to find the journal. Suddenly, a loud stone door slammed shut behind her. The chamber was swallowed by darkness. And from somewhere deep inside the tunnel, slow, deliberate footsteps began moving toward her. The sound of footsteps echoed through the narrow chamber, each step slower and heavier than the last. Queen Eleanor instinctively closed the journal and held it tightly against her chest. Her heart pounded so loudly that it seemed impossible for anyone nearby not to hear it. The lantern in her trembling hand flickered as the darkness slowly swallowed the room. Then, a voice broke the silence. *'You were never supposed to find this place." The voice was calm, familiar, and filled with disappointment. As the figure stepped into the lantern's dim light, Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. It was King Aldrich. He stood at the entrance of the hidden chamber, dressed not in his royal robes but in a dark cloak, surrounded by 4 silent guards. None of them spoke. None of them even looked at the Queen. They simply waited for the king's command. For several long moments, neither of them said a word. Finally, Eleanor held up the journal and asked the question that had been burning inside her heart. "What is this place?" The king looked at the ancient book before answering. "It is the reason this kingdom still exists." His voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. Eleanor stepped closer. These names, these disappearances, were they all real? King Aldrich slowly lowered his head. They were sacrifices. The Queen could hardly believe what she was hearing. Innocent people were sacrificed. "They were dangerous," the king replied. "Some discovered secrets that could have destroyed the crown. Others betrayed the kingdom. A ruler cannot allow chaos to spread." Eleanor stared at the man she thought she knew. This was no longer the husband who had once promised to protect his people. This was a king willing to bury the truth to preserve his throne. "You murdered them," she whispered. The king closed his eyes. "I protected the kingdom." The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, Eleanor took a deep breath. The people deserve the truth. The moment those words left her lips, the king's expression changed. For the first time that night, fear disappeared from his face. It was replaced by certainty. "You still don't understand," he said quietly. "Some truths destroy nations." Eleanor shook her head. "No truth is more dangerous than a lie." The king looked toward his guards. For a brief second, no one moved. Then he gave a single nod. The soldiers stepped forward. Eleanor tried to run, but the narrow chamber offered nowhere to escape. The journal slipped from her hands and crashed onto the stone floor as 2 guards seized her arms. She struggled desperately. "Let me go." No one answered. The king simply watched in silence. She searched his face, hoping to find the man she had married. Instead, she saw only a ruler who had already made his decision. The guards led her deeper into the underground passages until they reached a circular chamber unlike any she had seen before. In the center stood a massive stone coffin. Its lid rested beside it. Iron chains hung from the walls. The air was thick with dust and the smell of damp earth. "This place," Eleanor whispered. "What is it?" The king stepped into the chamber. "It was built by my ancestors." She looked around in horror. "For what purpose?" He answered without emotion. To make people disappear. The queen felt tears forming in her eyes. You would do this to your own wife? King Aldrich remained silent for several moments before speaking. If the kingdom learns what lies beneath this castle, every noble family will turn against the crown. Civil war will follow. Thousands will die. He paused. I cannot allow that. Eleanor's voice trembled. So I must die, to protect your throne. The king looked away. To protect the kingdom. For the first time since entering the tunnels, the queen stopped fighting. She realized there would be no mercy, no rescue, no miracle, only silence. She looked directly into the king's eyes. You may erase my name. You may hide my body. You may even bury this chamber beneath stone. She took one final step toward him. But one day, the truth will find its way back into the light. Those words echoed through the chamber. Even the guards lowered their eyes. For a single heartbeat, King Aldrich hesitated. His hands trembled ever so slightly. It was the only sign that somewhere beneath the weight of the crown, the man who had once loved Eleanor still existed. But duty, or what he believed was duty, proved stronger than love. He quietly raised his hand. The guards obeyed. As the heavy stone lid was slowly lifted, the lantern's flame flickered wildly, casting long shadows across the chamber walls. Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky. Deep beneath the castle, a decision was about to be made, one that would haunt the kingdom for centuries. And far above them, the first rays of dawn began to appear, completely unaware that history itself was about to be buried beneath the stone. The chamber fell silent. The guards stood frozen as Queen Eleanor looked one last time at the man she had once loved. There was no anger left in her eyes, only sadness. She understood that the crown had changed King Aldrich into someone who believed that fear was stronger than truth. Without another word, the queen stepped toward the ancient stone coffin. King Aldrich watched in silence. His face remained expressionless, but inside, a battle raged between the king he had become and the husband he once was. The guards slowly lowered the heavy stone lid. As it settled into place, its weight echoed through the underground chamber like the ringing of a funeral bell. The torches flickered. The wind howled through the tunnels. And then, everything became silent. No royal funeral was ever announced. No mourning bells rang across the kingdom. The people were simply told that Queen Eleanor had fallen gravely ill and had died peacefully during the night. A magnificent funeral procession was held, but the coffin carried through the streets was empty. The kingdom wept for a queen they believed had received a royal burial. No one suspected that the real story had been hidden beneath the castle itself. King Aldrich never spoke of that night again. He ordered every entrance to the underground tunnels sealed with solid stone. The guards who had witnessed the event disappeared one by one over the following months, and the ancient journal was locked away where no future generation could ever discover it. Years passed. Then decades. Eventually, centuries. The castle changed hands many times. Kings came and went. Wars reshaped the kingdom. Fires destroyed parts of the fortress, and new walls were built over old foundations. With every passing generation, the story of Queen Eleanor slowly faded into legend. People still whispered strange tales. Some servants claimed they heard faint cries beneath the castle after midnight. Others spoke of mysterious footsteps echoing through empty corridors. Many dismissed those stories as superstition. After all, legends have a way of growing darker with time. Then, hundreds of years later, everything changed. A team of workers began restoring the oldest section of the castle after part of its underground foundation collapsed. As they cleared away centuries of fallen stone, one of their tools struck something unusual. Not solid rock. A hollow wall. Curious, they carefully removed the loose stones. Behind them lay a forgotten passage that had remained untouched for generations. Their lanterns illuminated a narrow corridor buried beneath layers of dust. No footprints. No signs of life. Only silence. As they ventured deeper into the darkness, they entered a circular chamber unlike anything recorded in the castle's history. In its center rested an ancient stone coffin. The lid was still sealed. Time itself seemed to have stopped inside that room. Historians, scholars, and royal officials gathered to witness the extraordinary discovery. Nobody knew who rested inside. Slowly, the heavy stone lid was lifted. Inside lay the remains of a woman dressed in faded royal garments. Around her neck rested a necklace bearing the forgotten royal crest of Queen Eleanor. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one of the historians noticed something that sent a chill through the entire chamber. The inside of the stone lid was covered with deep scratches. Long, desperate, uneven scratches. As though someone had fought with every ounce of strength to escape. The room fell silent. Had the legend been true all along? Or had those marks been carved long before the coffin was ever sealed? No one could answer with certainty. The discovery shocked the kingdom. Ancient records were reopened. Forgotten documents were carefully examined. Among them, historians uncovered fragments of an old royal journal. Most of its pages had been destroyed by time, but one sentence remained perfectly readable. Asterisk, some truths remain buried, because the living fear them more than the dead. Asterisk. Even after centuries, no evidence could fully explain what had happened beneath the castle. Some believed King Aldrich had sacrificed the woman he loved to protect his throne. Others argued that the entire legend had grown from rumors and fear. Without undeniable proof, the mystery remained unsolved. But perhaps that was always the point. History often remembers kings for the battles they won. It remembers castles for the wars they survived. Yet sometimes, the greatest secrets are not written in history books. They remain hidden beneath cold stone, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. So the next time you visit an ancient castle and walk through its quiet halls, remember this. Not every wall hides treasure. Not every tunnel leads to freedom. And not every queen receives the ending that history chooses to tell. Perhaps the truth is still buried, waiting beneath your feet. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this mysterious story, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to *** Sleepless Stories *** for more dark historical mysteries and legendary tales. And remember, some stories are forgotten, others are buried, but the most terrifying ones are the stories that refuse to stay buried.